Conduct of business, receive third quarter financial update report as of March 31st, 2019, and adopt a resolution approving the third quarter budget amendment for FY 2018-19 operating and capital budget. Finance Director DeMartini.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DeMartini, the Finance Director for the City, and it is my pleasure, can you hear me? It's my pleasure to present the third quarter financial projection for the City for the current fiscal year 2018-2019. So the objective of the presentation this evening is to, number one, receive the Q3 financial update report as of the end of March 31st, 2019. Which is no action, but I am requesting an action to adopt a resolution approving of 2 budget amendments in the current fiscal year. So the agenda for the evening is to first receive an overview of the current fiscal year's operating budget, and also receive the Q3 update, which will include a summary of revenues and expenditures through the end of March 31st for the general fund, the 4 enterprise funds, and the 4 internal service funds as well. I'll provide a quick overview of the 2 budget amendments being requested and then have my formal request to City Council. So an overview of the current fiscal year operating structure. We do formally prepare financial reports on a quarterly basis. I've already presented the Q1 and the Q2 update to Council. Tonight is the Q3 update. Reporting on actuals to date through the end of March 2019. The Q4 update will be done in conjunction with the city's comprehensive annual financial report, or the CAFR, which will be done with our auditing firm, and that is scheduled to come in January every year. Okay, these 2 pie charts, which you've seen before, high-level overview of the city's revenue and expenditures. These pie charts are just for the city's general fund. As you can see, the revenue pie chart on the left shows the majority of our sources in the general fund coming from property and sales taxes. On the expenditure pie chart on the right, you'll see a majority of the general fund revenues being used to support the public safety departments with police and fire. Just a reminder that these are only for the city's general fund. The city does have a substantial amount of revenue coming from enterprise functions such as water and wastewater operations, which we'll talk about shortly. So just as a high-level overview of the revenues in the general fund through the end of Q3 compared to the adopted budget and the end of Q3 as of last fiscal year. In summary, the revenues through Q3 are at approximately 66% of the total budget, which is exactly the same as of the end of Q3 last fiscal year. So we are on the same run rate at the same time we were last fiscal year. Property taxes, our largest revenue source in the general fund, is typically paid by property owners in two installments, in December and in April. And again, it's on track to come in at the same, it's projected to come in on budget by the end of this fiscal year. For sales tax revenues, it's a couple $100,000 more compared to the same period last year. I had reported previously that there were some delays from the state in processing a lot of the remittances for sales taxes due to a very large system implementation that they were working on. Those delays have pretty much gone away now, so we are on track to receive all of the remittances that we should receive this fiscal year. We send out quarterly bills for the regulatory card room tax, and we're projected to be on budget by the end of this fiscal year as well. For business taxes, our annual renewal notifications are sent out actually coming up next month, and they're due back to the city on July 1st. Typically, July revenue is higher for that reason. And you will see a large percent increase in the use of money and property line item. That's primarily attributable to higher than expected returns that the city has recently recognized on our investments. So the next table is a high-level general fund expenditure summary by the departments that are funded by the general fund. In summary, the expenditures through Q3 are at 74% of the total budget, which is a little bit higher than we were at the end of Q3 at last fiscal year. Our expenditures are at $35.6 million of the total budget, and my review of the department's expenditures to date leads me to believe that all of them are within an acceptable range at this point of the fiscal year. There are no red flags that are jumping out at me at this moment. I've been working very closely with departments on controlling and understanding their expenditures to date and what expenditures they expect to have by the end of the fiscal year, as we've been having budget conversations for the upcoming fiscal year budget process. So I feel confident at this point that these run rates are acceptable at this time. This next slide shows a summary of the city's enterprise funds. The first two, water and wastewater, the revenues through the third quarter are as expected. They do include 9 months of service charges from the 5-year rate plan that was approved by the City Council back in May of 2017. The revenues show higher than expenditures. The revenues do include all the revenue sources that go into the enterprise fund, from utility bills that get sent out, as well as water capacity charges for the hookups for new properties that come online. The fund does also have the operating expenses for the operation, as well as the capital expenses for both the water and the wastewater funds. Those capital expenses are shown in these funds as well. Cable revenues are consistent to last year at this time as well. We have instituted some cost containment measures in the cable department as of late. I've been working very closely with the cable director on that to really make sure that they do come in on budget this year, so that we do not see ourselves having a fund deficit like we have had in prior years in the cable enterprise. And also, you'll see stormwater fees are collected through the property tax roll as well. Payments we get for stormwater in December and April, typically from property owners as well. There's no major change to note there. The city does have 4 internal service funds: central garage, building and facilities, self-insurance, and technology. These 4 operations support the city at large. They support all of the city departments, and so these departments allocate out their expenses at the end of the fiscal year to all of the city departments. And we charge out those services on a monthly basis to departments. The only notable thing I'll say here is on the self-insurance fund. The expenditures were about $430,000 less than the same period last year. This was really due to a timing issue of when the insurance premiums were prepaid in the second quarter. So there's no cause for alarm there. It's just a timing issue. So just my takeaways after presenting a couple slides with a bunch of numbers on them. In the general fund, revenues are coming in as expected. So that is a really good sign. The expenditure run rates, in my opinion, are within a normal, acceptable range through 9 months of actuals at this time. And I have not identified any major issues with any of the actuals that I've analyzed at this time. And same thing with the enterprise and the internal service funds. It's normal expected activity. And just for an abundance of caution, particularly with the cable enterprise, as I mentioned earlier, really wanting to institute some cost containment measures to make sure that they do come in on budget. So I've been working very closely with the cable director on that. And all of this work has been used also in the preparation for the upcoming fiscal year 1920 city manager's proposed budget as well. So all of this work will flow very nicely has already flown nicely into that whole process. There are 2 budget amendments before you this evening. First, in the general fund, is for the Pine Box Culvert Fencing Project in Public Works. If you recall, in the 1819 adopted budget, there was an enhancement request for this project for $35,000 for the repair and replacement of damaged fencing sections around the Pine Box Culvert between 1st and 7th Avenues. This project is further along now, and it does require an additional $35,000 for a total project budget of $70,000, including contingency. This funding is being requested from the general fund balance that's currently residing in the general fund, and we have money to pay for this. That's the first request. The second request is coming from the restricted revenue fund. This is calls for a zoning code update in the Community and Economic Development Department. In the Planning Department's current fiscal year adopted budget, there is a line item in there for $12,500 already from this fund for normal general plan maintenance activities. An additional $60,000 is being requested to allow for a much more robust update to the zoning code, which is a strategic initiative in that department, and it will ensure legal consistency with the city's general plan and transit corridor plan and housing and planning related state laws. And the staff report goes into a little bit more detail about why we would like to move forward with that now. So just a little preview and reminder about the upcoming budget calendar for next fiscal year's proposed budget. Staff have been working very hard on reviewing and proposing next fiscal year's budget to City Council. We are on track to have the city's proposed operating and capital budgets to City Council by next Friday. The first City Council budget retreat is scheduled for Tuesday, May 29th. We are on track to have that. The second session is scheduled on June 11th, and the schedule is to ask for City Council's adoption of the proposed budget on June 25th. So with that, my request to Council is to receive the Q3 financial update report as of March 31st, 2019, and request that you adopt a resolution approving of the third quarter budget amendment for fiscal year 2018-19 operating and capital budget. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Questions of Director? Michael?
Chair, thank you.
Please.
So, Mr. DeMartini, so it looks like we're tracking exactly like we were, pretty close to last year, but we ended up a little short at the end of last year. So have you had a chance to sort of dig into what sort of went wrong in that last little bit that sort of derailed us, and are we prepared to avoid any similar pitfalls this year?
I guess I might have to ask you a follow-up question, Councilmember Salazar, about what specifically you're talking about, how we came up short last year.
Well, at the end, we ended up, I believe, having to draw from the previous year's surplus to sort of make up the shortfall.
Sure.
So that we ended up a little short on the budget.
Okay.
And so if we're tracking similarly to last year, I'm just wondering, what. I mean, it looks good. It looked good last year, and then at the end, it's like, oh wow, we're a little short. So, how do we avoid getting into that situation? And I know that this is your first. You weren't here for that, but I'm just wondering if you had an opportunity to kind of analyze that, and if you have any insight into what went wrong.
Sure. So the first part of that is, I believe that this current fiscal year budget does have a budgeted deficit, meaning that we are budgeting to use fund balance in the general fund as the budget was adopted. And so that means that the revenue that was budgeted is actually a little bit less than the expenditures that were budgeted. And so this report is making sure, and the review that I'm doing is making sure that we do not exceed the expenditures above and beyond the expenditure budget. Right? So I'm making sure that we don't spend more on the expenditure side than was originally budgeted, knowing that there was a deficit that was already budgeted, if you will. The review that I was talking about in a little bit of detail with the cable department, it was to that effect. Mm-hmm. The cable department specifically was budgeted at a slight deficit. So I'm working with the cable director to really make sure that they don't spend more than their budgeted expenditures.
And then going into the next fiscal year, you believe we'll be able to get to the point then where we are balancing without the need of using those?
City Manager.
All right, so I'll take that one because that will be part of the City Manager's recommended budget. And so we are, at the final steps in preparing a recommended budget for you that the City Council will receive on May 24th. And so what you will see when you receive that is that we have done a lot of work, department by department, division by division, to control costs, cut costs, not approve necessary expenditures, delay things, to try and live within our means as much as we can. I think what you will also see during that presentation on the 29th is that there are some needed expenditures that staff will be recommending that all in all might be one time, but I hope you'll agree that need to occur. We have some significant infrastructure challenges that we need to meet, and we will be recommending some capital projects that in total will be one-time allocations, but we may have a little bit of the same picture where we will be recommending a budgeted adoption that is slightly above our adopted revenue. We have and will continue to work hard to control that. I think through our larger presentations, this city has a fiscal challenge, and we also have a duty to live within our means and work on that. And so we are making progress to that. I can't tell you that, we will be successful in eliminating a $1.7 million deficit in 1 year. I don't think we're there, but we are working very hard at it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Sure. Marty.
Thank you. There's some saying you want to get the bad news first, right? Something like that. It might have been Warren Buffett. But I think it's important to point out in the staff report really what you really are doing for cable. There are 7 different things here. Do you mind, for the public, just kind of going through a few of those and why, how important it is? I mean, I'm glad that we're doing this. In the past, we didn't. And our fiber installations are in, and so we're waiting for the rollout to figure out how we're going to pay for that rollout, which is a separate topic. But still, these 7 things I think are require, in my opinion, a little bit more sharing with the public so that they can hear it. So,
Director.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So on page 4 of the staff report, I list 7 things that I'm doing in collaboration with the cable department to control and contain the expenses in the department. We are delaying the replacement of vans and vehicles until next fiscal year. We are delaying or not moving forward with any non-essential equipment purchases. We are reducing some contractor hours and reducing the hourly rates of those contractual arrangements. We are reducing the internet service fees by a little over $18,000 per month due to the successful renegotiation of contracts with some of those providers. We are reducing some maintenance expenses to cover only ongoing contractual arrangements. We are reducing spending in professional development, special projects, license fees, dues and memberships, publications, subscriptions. We're reducing expenses in community promotions, training, rental leases, tools and equipment. We're basically looking at any and all ways that we can course correct and live within the means of the budget of that department within the last 2 months of the fiscal year.
Great, thank you. And that's difficult to do when we're trying to build the business where we have these new rates that are lower and more competitive for people that are watching now. They know because they're on cable. But I just wanted to commend staff on that, and I wanted to comment that we have some very difficult choices to make in the future, and the city manager touched on it. I look forward to discussing those challenges, and I'm looking forward to that to hear that report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments, Laura?
Just a couple other comments. So, you always look back at the budgets, and I just like to remind people, 62% of our budget really is police and fire. It's an important aspect of our overall budget. And without, dedicated and fire department and police department where you can count on. I mean, that's an important thing. You just can't really cut costs, right? But the other important thing is really sales tax, and I'm really happy to see the analysis that we're going to be looking at that. And I think that's a big piece too, because it's kind of one of the things that I've always found very interesting is that we're spending more. I know where I'm spending a lot more. I don't ever walk into Costco without a large dollar amount. It never used to be that way. But I know I'm spending more in San Bruno, and I really try to advocate for spending in San Bruno, but we're just not seeing the revenue. And so it would be really, I'm very interested in seeing what the outcome of that is. And then the other question, and really a question just in that area, is online sales. And is the city able to pick up online sales, or is that going to the county?
Manager?
So most online sales are treated such that they go to the county pool and not directly to the cities. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of analysts following Amazon and how they treat their sales tax. Amazon has continued to pay their sales tax to the county pool, which has been beneficial because they, as of current laws last year, I can't say that I've kept track in the last 6 months, they were able to do special sales tax agreements where they have their warehouses and have that be the point of sale. But they have chosen not to do that, and they've chosen to allow that money to flow to the local jurisdictions. And so while if you buy an Amazon package in San Bruno does not immediately get that, all of those sales go to the county pool, and then they're distributed out to the cities, I believe, based on population. And so we do get a share.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good presentation.
And then thank you for the report. Of course, I'm sure we're all looking forward to the 29th for 10 to 5. But I also wanted to thank Marty for bringing up the 7 items, because it's sometimes too, not everybody's going through every minutia of that. And it's also renegotiating, thank you, Sandeep, for some of the contracts where there was deficit and you've gotten that down. And it's actually just the hard work of going back, renegotiating, and doing things that have not been done to help bring that in line. So these are steps that truly are being taken that are unprecedented, but in order to make it work and come in with budget, I appreciate those steps. Okay, so with that, this is, we would need to adopt a resolution approving the third quarter budget amendment.
Motion to adopt the resolution for approving the third quarter budget.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.